Hi, and welcome to What's for Dinner, where I cook but you still have to. Tonight we'll be making roasted pork fried rice using all the ingredients you see on screen now. This will contain a few specialty ingredients, including the soy sauce and sesame oil. These aren't really specialty, you can find these at pretty much any grocery store. The next three, however, the garlic chili sauce, sweet soy sauce, and fish sauce, may be a little harder to find, but they're worth the trip to a specialty Asian store in order to get them. Here we're starting off with some frozen stir-fry vegetables. I'm just going to go ahead and microwave these for a couple minutes just to get them started. I want to pull the chill off. I don't want them to be 100% frozen when they first go in. Next we're going to go ahead and start working on our vegetables. Here we have some celery that is less than ideal. It had been sitting in the fridge for a little while, so I went ahead and I picked off the pieces that were not looking too good and just sliced up what we had left. I would have liked more, but this is all we had. Knife fundamentals are not something that I've touched on too much in this series, and I would like to change that today. So here we do need to dice up these onions, and there are two good ways to dice an onion. The first is to make horizontal cuts parallel to the cutting board, and then make vertical cuts perpendicular to the cutting board, and then dice the onion thusly. This is a pretty much accepted way. This is the classical way to dice an onion, and I find it to be a very bad way to dice an onion. If you need very precise little cubes, this is the best way to do it. But if you're just looking to dice the onion in the sense of you just want it in relatively small pieces, this is it's a lot of extra work. It can be a little dangerous for those who are not super comfortable with a knife in their hands, and I much prefer the way I'm going to show next. That is to use the radial nature of the onion. That is that it's kind of a circle, that it's a set of concentric circles and arches. So if you make cuts with the blade facing outward and then slowly turn the blade back towards you as you go around the curve of the onion, what you'll do is you'll cut it into fairly even sized slices. You can then just dice across this, being a little careful because these pieces can slide apart, but you're never cutting towards your hand, never cutting towards your body, and you can see here the results are almost exactly the same. So I'm going to go ahead and keep dicing the rest of this onion, and then we'll turn our attention to the next vegetable. With the onions taken care of, we can go ahead and turn our attention to the next vegetable on the list, which is going to be our bell peppers. Now, normally I'm a big advocate of having lots of different shapes and textures in your dish. With something like fried rice, that's not so much the case. I would rather everything be roughly the same size, that way you get all the flavors in each bite. So here with the peppers, I am not going to dice them, but I'm going to cut them into fairly small slices, about 1 inch long and maybe 1/4 of an inch wide. They still fit on a fork, fit on a spoon, but a little bit of variety doesn't hurt. So next we're going to turn our attention to the garlic. I don't have very much here. It's maybe 1/4 cup of whole cloves, if I can get them all out of the bag. Here I'm going to slice these and just slice them. I'm not going to dice them any farther than that. This is because I want the garlic to really stand out, especially because I don't have that much. I didn't realize how low I was on garlic when I made this. So this will allow, when you do bite into a piece of garlic, it'll be fairly large and provide a lot of garlic flavor when that happens. Next, we'll turn our attention to the ginger. Normally, I would have thrown the ginger, the garlic, and the jalapenos in the food processor and just be done with it. But our kids were already in bed this night, and I didn't want to risk waking them up by making all the noise with the food processor. So here you can see I'm just kind of cleaning the ginger up. Again, I don't usually peel ginger all the way, but just cutting some of the excess off is definitely not a bad idea. And now I'm just kind of trying to decide what to do with this kind of awkward thumb with the big gouge in it. I actually ended up not using it because I didn't need that much ginger. So in order to mince the ginger or kind of very finely dice the ginger, the best option is going to be to kind of cut slabs off of it, as you can see I'm doing here, very thinly. We'll then stack those up and then cut those slabs into very fine sticks, like about the size of a matchstick. We'll then cross-cut those to finely mince them. You could kind of scissor chop it farther after that, but I think that's plenty processed. You do want to get ginger into fairly small pieces because it is such a strong flavor. Biting into a big piece of ginger generally tends to be pretty unpleasant, unless that's kind of what you're going for. And here, just to kind of touch on fundamentals again, you can see I've got my fingers curled back to keep them away from the blade. This becomes really important when you're dealing with very small knife work like this. It becomes a lot easier to cut yourself. Here you can actually see I've got my thumb sticking out a little bit. That's technically not a good thing to do. I know what I'm doing, but I would not recommend that you do that. You should be a little more careful than I'm being right now. So next we're going to turn our attention to jalapenos. Again, normally I would just throw these in the food processor, but I didn't want to do that tonight, so we're going to go ahead and dice these, or we'll finally dice these by hand. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the seeds and the membrane inside. This kind of helps reduce the amount of spice that they provide. I don't want this to be crazy spicy because there's going to be a few other spices in there as well. So just kind of peel out the membrane and just flick it with your finger, tap it with your finger. All the seeds tend to fall out. So much like with the ginger, we're going to go ahead and cut these into about matchstick size pieces. You can be a little bit more loose and free. These jalapenos weren't very strong, so having them in little rougher size is okay. I wasn't being super careful here to get them in a really small fine dice. And then this will all go in one big pile. So here is the roasted pork, and I would like to take a moment to kind of pause here and talk about the pork. You don't have to use pork. You could definitely use chicken or beef or even seafood for this. If you were to use seafood, I would recommend that you add it in at the very end, especially if it's already cooked, and I would recommend you already cook it for this kind of application. So that's just kind of a note on the different meats you can use. This dish is going to require 2 pans, so I've got the big wok right there and then a small frying pan on the side. The wok is where we'll actually fry the rice. The frying pan is where I'm going to bring all the other flavors together. So a little grapeseed oil in the pan. I'm also going to add a little sesame oil to add some more flavor. We will add sesame oil to the dish again to kind of reinforce that flavor. Again, this seems like a lot of oil, but I would argue that it's not that much. This kind of dish does tend to be a little greasier. Now, I'd like to pause again. These are Szechuan peppercorns. If you can't find these, feel free to omit them. I really like the flavor, but you do want to grind them up like this. I happen to have this nice little mortar and pestle. If you bite into one of those straightforward as it is, it's a lot of flavor and it will kind of make your mouth go numb. So we're going to put the peppercorns in there and just fry them for a few seconds to release the flavors. Again, that's not very much Szechuan peppercorn, but they are very strong. Next, we're going to add in the garlic, the ginger, and the jalapenos and kind of fry that together for a few minutes. Say hi to Moose. He's becoming a staple here on What's for Dinner. So we'll keep frying that together. It fried for maybe 2 minutes total. Once you start to see some browning on the edges, you'll go ahead and move to the next step. So we'll work the onion in there, and if you didn't notice, these little flexible cutting boards are great for lots of things besides cutting on. We're going to go ahead and toss that together and just keep sauteing it. While the onions and everything else saute together, we're going to go ahead and get about half a stick of butter ready. That's going to be very important for the fried rice. Getting fried rice to turn out right requires a decent amount of fat, and butter is definitely a good fat for this. It promotes the browning that you really want in fried rice. So now we're going to add in the celery. Go ahead and toss that through, continue cooking. You notice this is all the stuff that can take a little bit more longer cook time. That's why it's all going in first. So just get some base seasoning on there. This will help pull some more of the moisture out, which is going to be very important. This pan that I've got here with all the vegetables and meat in it, I want to get that as dry as possible because I don't want the fried rice to become soggy when we add everything else in. This is partly why I'm doing this in a separate pan. My wok is cheap and cannot get hot enough to help evaporate off all the liquid that I'm going to add in here. So with the pork in and tossed through, I'm going to go ahead and hit it with a little soy sauce and just the smallest bit of fish sauce. If you've never used fish sauce, it'll be very apparent as soon as you open it why you use a very small amount. It is very pungent and very strong, and immediately it may smell like it's not going to taste good, but it really does add a flavor that really makes kind of Asian food very Asian, which is a very bad description, but it adds that kind of, that something that makes Asian food taste the way that it does. So we added in some of the garlic chili sauce, and then we're going to toss that through and then add the peppers on top. I'm not going to toss the peppers in because I don't want them to overcook. This will just kind of help them warm up while everything cooks. So now we're going to turn our attention to the rice. This is the basmati rice left over from the last episode of What's for Dinner when I made curry. So I'm going to go ahead and break it up with my hands. We've got our wok with our sesame oil, grapeseed oil, and butter. It is now rocket hot. You can see it's smoking. You can see that butter begin sizzling off and starting to brown almost immediately. That's pretty much exactly what we want. You want the wok to be very hot, or the rice will stick and gum up and get real starchy. So here I just push the rice down flat so it makes a lot of good contact with the metal. This will help promote browning of the rice. Now with the rice in the pan, we're going to go ahead and add another flavor to our meat and vegetables. This is sweet soy sauce. It's kind of Asia's response to molasses. It can be a little hard to find, but it adds a really good flavor to a lot of things. Go ahead and toss that through and just let that keep cooking. The rice has been sauteing for maybe 2 or 3 minutes now, so we're going to go ahead and turn it over. You can start to see it's beginning to brown. And at this point now that the browning process has really started, we're going to want to move the rice pretty much in here constantly. So if you're not doing anything else, you should be turning the rice. Here I'm going to go ahead and do a taste test. I'm just checking the salt. I want to see how salty this is, if it needs any more seasoning, which it did, so I added some more soy sauce rather than just adding salt. The soy sauce adds a little bit more extra flavor. So besides constantly stirring the rice, we're also going to keep tossing the meat and vegetables. We want it to dry out. You can see all this moisture in the bottom of the pan. That's not good. We don't want that. So by constantly tossing it and keeping it over medium-high heat, it will help to dry that pan out a little bit. So we'll keep moving the rice, just constantly stirring, constantly tossing, constantly turning. We don't want the rice to burn. And then we're going to go ahead and add soy sauce to the rice. This will give it its familiar brown color and start to kind of build that fried rice flavor that we're all used to. So again, once the soy sauce is in, you very quickly want to keep turning it so it does not stick. You can see the color changes quite dramatically once you've got it all mixed in. And once you've got it all mixed in, you also want to give it a taste test, like everything. It may need a little more seasoning, which this did, so I added just another like maybe half teaspoon of soy sauce, stirred it through. And again, I decided it needs just a hint more. We do like a little bit of salt in our house. This is the last ingredient for the rice, to prep the rice. This is rice wine vinegar. It just adds a little bit of sharpness to the dish. It was a little sweet, a little savory, but it kind of lacked something else, and I determined that was going to be a little vinegar, a little acid in there. So with the rice pretty much finished off, we'll go ahead and add in the vegetables. We'll dump in the meat and everything else, and then just toss everything all the way through. And all of a sudden, it starts to look a lot like fried rice. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and kill the heat. It's done. I'm going to go here. I picked off some cilantro, and I'm just going to tear it up with my hands. It doesn't need to be chopped up. And then I'm just going to toss that through really quickly right at the very end. So we'll go ahead and get this plated, get this ready, and we are done. I thank you for watching. I hope you will like, favorite, and especially subscribe and share these videos so that we can keep bringing them every week. I have some things in store in the future, some more What's for Dinner, and along with some other projects. Thank you for watching. Bye.